The conference hall on Zenith Prime stretched for nearly half a kilometer, its crystal walls displaying the swirling colors of the nebula outside. Captain Jack Morrison stood near the back of the human delegation, watching as representatives from 100 different species argued in their seats. His uniform felt too tight, too formal for a place where Earth barely had a voice. Ambassador Lisa Grant sat at the human table, her hands folded carefully in front of her. She looked calm, but Morrison had served with her long enough to see the tension in her shoulders. The Galactic Council had called this emergency session 3 days ago, and the message had been clear: attend or be considered in violation of treaty obligations. Morrison glanced at Lieutenant Kate Sullivan, who stood beside him with her datapad active. She was tracking the conversation through the translation matrix, her eyes moving quickly across the screen. Kate looked up and shook her head slightly. The news was not good. The chamber fell silent as High Arbiter Kelnoth raised one of his 4 arms. The massive alien looked like a cross between a mantis and a bear, covered in thick gray plates. His voice boomed through the translation speakers. The matter is settled. The Vraxian Empire has filed a territorial claim on the human colonies in the outer sectors. According to galactic law, established civilizations have priority over newcomer species in disputed territories. Lisa stood slowly, her voice steady despite the murmur of conversation that followed. Those territories were uninhabited when we arrived. We've had settlements there for 15 years. Our people have built lives there. A harsh clicking sound filled the chamber. Morrison knew that sound well. It was laughter from the Vraxian delegation. High Commander Zreth rose from his seat, his scaled body moving with predatory grace. The Vraxian looked almost human in shape, but his skin was the color of dried blood, and his eyes were pure black. The human speaks as if time matters, Zreth said, his words dripping with contempt. My people have sailed between stars for 20,000 of your years. Your entire civilization is an infant. These worlds fall within our historical expansion zone. Lisa's jaw tightened. Historical expansion zone? Your nearest colony is 40 light-years away from our settlements. Irrelevant, Kelnoth interrupted. The Vraxian Empire holds a Class 7 civilization rating. Humanity holds Class 2, the law is clear. You have 30 standard days to evacuate your colonies. The Vraxian Empire will assume control on the 31st day. Morrison felt his hands curl into fists. Kate touched his arm gently, a warning to stay calm. Around them, other species were already losing interest, turning to their own conversations. To them, this was just another minor dispute. Humanity was too new, too small to matter. Lisa tried again. We request council intervention. Mediation at minimum. Denied, Kelnoth said flatly. The law does not require mediation when the rating difference exceeds 3 classes. This session is concluded. The crystal walls chimed, signaling the end of the meeting. Species began filing out, their delegates chatting casually. Morrison watched as several aliens approached the Vraxian delegation, clearly congratulating them. He caught fragments of conversation through his translator. How long do you think before they surrender? 3 days, maybe 4. Humans are cowards. I have 50 credits that say they don't even try to resist. Morrison's blood ran cold. They were betting on it, treating the potential destruction of human colonies like a sport. Kate leaned close to him. Captain, we need to leave. Now. Lisa was already moving toward the exit, her face a mask of controlled fury. Morrison and Kate fell in behind her, creating a protective formation as they walked through the crowd. Several aliens bumped into them deliberately, testing, probing for weakness. They made it to their ship, the Horizon, without incident. It was a small diplomatic vessel, armed only with basic defensive weapons. In a galaxy full of warships and battle cruisers, it was practically defenseless. Morrison hated that fact more with each passing day. Once aboard, Lisa immediately activated the secure communication channel to Earth. Admiral Henry Blake appeared on the screen within seconds. His gray hair was neat as always, but his expression was grave. I watched the whole thing, Blake said before Lisa could speak. The council refused, as expected. They're not even pretending to care about justice, Lisa said, her voice shaking with anger. The Vraxians filed a claim on our colonies and the council just handed them over. We have 30 days, Blake nodded slowly. The United Earth government is meeting now. We'll have a response within hours. What response? Morrison couldn't help himself. We have 73 ships in our entire deep space fleet. The Vraxians have thousands. Our colonies have a combined population of 2 million people. We can't evacuate them all in 30 days, and we certainly can't fight. Blake's eyes met his through the screen. Captain Morrison, how long have you served in the fleet? 19 years, sir. Then you know that humanity has never accepted defeat easily. Blake leaned forward. Return to the outer Terran colonies. Defensive positions. Make it look like we're preparing for a fight. Sir, that's suicide, Kate said. Perhaps, Blake replied, but sometimes you need to buy time. Horizon, you are authorized to use Protocol Nightfall authorization codes upon arrival. Lisa's eyes widened. Protocol Nightfall? That's been classified above my clearance level since it was created. Not anymore, Blake said. You'll receive the full briefing during your transit. Blake out, the screen went dark. Morrison looked at Lisa, who was already moving to the navigation console. Set course for the colonies, she ordered. Maximum speed. The Horizon's engines came to life and the ship pulled away from Zenith Prime. Morrison watched the massive station shrink in the view screen, surrounded by hundreds of alien vessels. Ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Kate brought up the tactical display. Captain, I'm reading increased activity from the Vraxian fleet. They're mobilizing. How many ships? Morrison asked. Kate was quiet for a moment. At least 300, and that's just what our sensors can detect. Morrison felt a weight settle in his chest. 300 ships. Against humanity's 73. It wasn't a war. It would be a massacre. The communication console chimed. Morrison activated it and a single text message appeared. It was from Admiral Blake, marked with the highest level of encryption. The message contained one word. Awaken. Morrison stared at it, confused. Kate leaned over his shoulder, reading it with him. What does that mean? She asked. Lisa turned from the navigation station, and Morrison saw something he had never seen before in her eyes. It was hope. It means, she said quietly, that Earth has been preparing for this day since we first met the Galactic Council, and it means that the Vraxians have made a terrible mistake. The Horizon jumped into slipspace, leaving Zenith Prime and its casual cruelty behind. Morrison looked at the stars streaming past and felt something shift. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. It thought humans were weak, primitive, easily dismissed. The galaxy was about to learn otherwise. Commander Paul Diaz floated through the corridor in zero gravity, his magnetic boots keeping him anchored to the metal floor. The facility was cold, always cold. They kept it at near-freezing temperatures to reduce energy consumption. After 7 years working here, he barely noticed anymore. The Titan Project facility was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid designated Neptune 77, floating in the dark beyond Neptune's orbit. No one knew it existed except for a handful of people in Earth's government and military. Even most of Earth's fleet commanders thought it was just a deep space monitoring station. Commander, you need to see this, Dr. Helen Cross called from the observation deck. Her breath came out in small clouds as she spoke. Diaz pushed off and glided toward her. Helen was staring at the massive viewing window, and beyond it lay the reason they were all here. The reason humanity had poured 90% of its military budget into this single location for 25 years. The UES Vengeance hung in space like a sleeping giant. 5 kilometers long, its hull was the color of midnight, covered in armor plating that could withstand temperatures hot enough to melt planets. The ship looked less like a vessel and more like a mobile fortress, bristling with weapons batteries and shield generators. The activation order came through 10 minutes ago, Helen said, handing him a data pad. Straight from Admiral Blake. Protocol Nightfall is active. Diaz read the message twice to make sure he understood. His hands were shaking slightly. After all these years, it's really happening. The Vraxians are moving on our colonies, Helen continued. The Council refused to help. Earth Command wants the Vengeance operational in 7 days. 7 days? Diaz looked at the massive ship. Helen, we estimated it would take 2 weeks minimum to bring her out of cold storage. Every system needs to be tested, calibrated, armed. Then we work faster, Helen interrupted. She was smiling, but there was steel in her voice. We've prepared for this. Everyone here has trained for this moment. Let's show them what we can do. Diaz activated his communication link. All personnel, this is Commander Diaz. Protocol Nightfall is active. I repeat, Protocol Nightfall is active. Begin awakening sequence immediately. Throughout the facility, alarms began to sound. Not emergency alarms, but activation alarms. the sound of a giant waking up. Vice Admiral Greg Stone appeared on the communication screen from Earth Command. "Commander Diaz, what's your status?" "Beginning activation sequence now, sir. We'll have preliminary systems online within 12 hours. Stone nodded. "The Vraxian fleet is gathering. We're tracking over 300 ships. Our conventional fleet is moving to intercept, but we both know how that will end. The Vengeance is our only real option." "Understood, sir. We won't let you down." Stone's expression softened slightly. "Paul, I know what you and your team have sacrificed to build this ship. 7 years in the dark, away from families, working on something you couldn't tell anyone about. Earth owes you all a debt we can never repay." "Just make sure we get a chance to use it, sir," Diaz replied. The screen went dark. Diaz turned to Helen. "Start with the power core. Wake up the singularity." Helen's eyes widened. "That's the most dangerous part. If something goes wrong. If something goes wrong, the Vraxians will destroy our colonies and Earth will be next," Diaz said firmly. "We don't have time to be cautious." 20 levels below the observation deck in the heart of the Titan Project facility, engineers were already working on the Vengeance's power core. It was unlike anything else humanity had ever built. At its center was a captured black hole, no larger than a marble, held in place by gravitational fields and quantum stabilizers. The technology had come from a derelict ship found drifting in deep space 12 years ago. The ship's builders were long dead, their civilization extinct for reasons no one understood. But their technology worked, and humanity's best scientists had spent years learning to recreate it. "Initiating containment field," one of the engineers called out. "Singularity is stable, power output rising. 10%, 20%, holding steady at 30. Diaz watched from the control room as the Vengeance began to come alive. Running lights flickered on along the hull. Shield generators hummed to life. Weapon systems began their startup sequences. "Time to full power?" Diaz asked. 6 days, 18 hours, Helen replied, checking her calculations. "We're actually ahead of schedule." "Not good enough. We need to shave at least a day off that." Helen looked at him. "Paul, if we push too hard, we could damage critical systems. The Vengeance has never been tested in actual combat conditions. And it won't be tested unless we get it operational in time," Diaz countered. "Increase power flow by 15%. Monitor the containment field closely. If anything looks unstable, back off immediately." The work continued around the clock. Engineers slept in shifts, grabbing food when they could. The facility that had been quiet for years now buzzed with constant activity. On the third day, Captain Eric Hayes arrived. He floated into the observation deck and stopped, staring at the Vengeance. Diaz had never seen the captain speechless before. "She's beautiful," Hayes finally said. "She's a monster," Diaz replied. "But she's our monster." Hayes was younger than Diaz expected for someone commanding humanity's most powerful weapon. 42 years old, with sharp blue eyes and a calm demeanor that seemed unshakable, he had been chosen from thousands of candidates, tested in simulators for 3 years, preparing for a mission that might never happen. Until now. "Crew is arriving over the next 2 days," Hayes said. 5,000 personnel. All volunteers. All aware this might be a one-way trip. "The Vengeance can handle anything the Vraxians throw at it," Diaz assured him. "I hope you're right," Hayes said quietly. "Because intelligence reports show they're mobilizing everything. This isn't just about the colonies anymore. The Vraxians are treating this as a chance to eliminate humanity entirely." Diaz felt anger rise in his chest. "Let them come. We'll show them what happens when you underestimate humans." On the 5th day, disaster nearly struck. A power surge in the secondary reactor caused a cascade failure in the port shield generator. Alarms shrieked throughout the facility as engineers raced to contain the damage. Helen worked furiously at her console, rerouting power and isolating the damaged systems. "We're losing containment on decks 40 through 50. If it reaches the main reactor, shut down the entire port side," Diaz ordered. "Reroute everything through starboard systems. That will set us back at least 20 hours. "Do it." Helen's fingers flew across the controls. Slowly, agonizingly, the alarms began to quiet. The crisis was contained, but precious time had been lost. Diaz slumped against the console, exhausted. They had been awake for nearly 30 hours straight. "We're not going to make it," Helen said softly. "Even working non-stop, we'll need at least 8 more days." Before Diaz could respond, the communication screen activated. It was Admiral Blake, and his expression was grim. "Commander, the Vraxian fleet has started moving." They'll reach the outer Terran colonies in 72 hours. Diaz felt his heart sink. Sir, we need at least 6 more days. 7 to be safe. You have 3, Blake said. Our conventional fleet will engage them. Buy you as much time as possible. But Paul, you need to understand. If the vengeance isn't ready, we lose everything. Our colonies, our credibility, possibly our independence. This is it. The screen went dark. Diaz looked at Helen, then at the vengeance through the viewing window. The ship was almost ready, but almost wasn't good enough. Get me every engineer in this facility, Diaz said. I don't care if they're off duty, sleeping, or dead on their feet. We're going to finish this ship in 3 days if it kills us. Helen nodded and started making calls. Around them, the facility came alive with renewed urgency. People who had already worked themselves to exhaustion found reserves of strength they didn't know they had, because they all understood the truth. Somewhere out in the dark, the Vraxian fleet was coming. 300 ships filled with warriors who had conquered a dozen species and never known defeat. But they had never faced humanity before. They had never seen what humans could build when survival was on the line. They had never witnessed what happened when you backed the human race into a corner with no way out. The vengeance waited in the darkness, and soon, very soon, it would awaken. The colony of Haven's Gate looked peaceful from orbit. Green fields stretched across the valleys and small towns dotted the landscape. 2 million people lived there, farming and building lives far from Earth. They had no idea what was coming. Captain Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon, watching the Vraxian fleet approach on the tactical display. 300 red markers moved steadily toward the colony. Behind them, Earth's defensive fleet showed as 73 blue markers already falling back in controlled retreat. They're not even trying to hide their contempt, Lieutenant Kate Sullivan said bitterly. Look at their formation. They're spread out like they're on parade, not heading into battle. Morrison had to agree. The Vraxian ships moved with casual arrogance, making no effort to protect their flanks or maintain defensive positions. They knew humanity couldn't hurt them. Why bother with caution? High Commander Zreth's face appeared on the communication screen, his black eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Human vessel Horizon, you are ordered to withdraw immediately. What follows is not your concern. Ambassador Lisa Grant stepped forward. Commander Zreth, I'm requesting one final negotiation. There's still time to avoid bloodshed. Zreth's laugh was like rocks grinding together. Negotiation? You have nothing to negotiate with. Your fleet runs like frightened children. Your colonies stand defenseless. Surrender now and I will consider allowing your people to live as servants. We won't surrender, Lisa said quietly. Then you will die, Zreth replied, and the galaxy will learn what happens to species who refuse to know their place. The screen went dark. Kate checked her console. The Vraxian fleet is entering weapons range. They're targeting the orbital platforms first. Morrison watched helplessly as the first shots were fired. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from the Vraxian warships, striking the defensive platforms around Haven's Gate. Explosions bloomed in the darkness like deadly flowers. On the colony below, alarms were sounding. People were running to shelters, gathering their children, praying to whatever gods they believed in. Morrison had family down there. A sister, 2 nephews. He had promised them they would be safe this far from Earth. He had been wrong. Vraxian flagship is powering up main weapons, Kate reported. They're targeting the northern continent. Population center. Estimated casualties if they fire. I know, Morrison interrupted. He didn't need to hear the numbers. Millions would die in the first strike. Zreth's voice came over the open channel, broadcasting to the entire system. Let this be a lesson to all who watch. This is the price of defiance. Morrison closed his eyes. This was it, the end. All of humanity's hopes, all their dreams of reaching the stars about to end in fire and death. Then space itself screamed. Every sensor on the horizon went insane at once. Alarms blared. The tactical display turned into a mess of error messages and impossible readings. Kate was frantically trying to make sense of the data. What is that? She shouted over the noise. I'm reading a massive gravitational distortion, right between us and the Vraxian fleet. It's like something just punched a hole in reality. Morrison stared at the view screen. Space was rippling, bending, tearing open like fabric being ripped apart. Light twisted and warped around a growing void, and then it emerged. The UES Vengeance came out of slipspace like a god of war rising from the deep, 5 kilometers of midnight black armor and weapons that humanity had built in secret for 25 years. The ship was so massive that it had its own gravitational field, strong enough to pull nearby debris into orbit around it. The Vraxian fleet stopped dead. Their weapons went silent. On the communication channels, Morrison could hear confused alien voices, demanding to know what they were seeing. The Vengeance positioned itself directly between the Vraxian fleet and Haven's Gate. The colony was now in the Dreadnought's shadow, protected by a ship that made the largest Vraxian battle cruiser look like a toy. A new voice came over the communication channel. Calm, measured human. This is Captain Eric Hayes of the United Earthship Vengeance. You have 10 minutes to withdraw beyond the system boundary. There will be no second warning. Silence filled the void. Morrison could hardly believe what he was seeing. The ship was real. Earth had actually built it, and it was here. Zreth's voice crackled over the channel, filled with rage. One ship? You dare threaten the Vraxian Empire with one ship? I have 300 warships under my command. 9 minutes, Hayes replied, his tone unchanged. You will be destroyed. Zreth screamed. All vessels, open fire. Target that abomination. The Vraxian fleet unleashed everything. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic rounds, weapons that could crack planets. All of it converged on the Vengeance in a storm of destruction that lit up space like a newborn star. Kate gripped her console, watching the sensor readings. Captain, they're hitting it with enough firepower to destroy a moon. The Vengeance should be. She stopped. The sensors told an impossible story. The Vengeance's shields absorbed the impacts like an ocean absorbing raindrops. Defensive grids sparked and glowed, redirecting energy harmlessly into space. Some shots missed entirely, deflected by gravitational fields that bent the trajectory of incoming fire. When the barrage finally ended, the Vengeance hung in space exactly where it had been, without a scratch on its hull. 8 minutes, Hayes said calmly. Morrison saw panic spreading through the Vraxian fleet. Ships were breaking formation, commanders shouting contradictory orders. They had never encountered anything that could withstand their combined firepower. The concept was alien to them. Zreth was screaming now, his composure completely gone. Again, fire again! That ship cannot be real. The Vraxians fired a second barrage, more desperate this time. The result was the same. The Vengeance absorbed everything they threw at it. 5 minutes, Hayes announced. Some of the Vraxian ships were already backing away, their commanders making individual decisions to retreat. But Zreth held his position, his pride refusing to let him run. You think you frighten me? Zreth broadcast. The Vraxian Empire has crushed civilizations far older than yours. You are nothing but primitive apes playing with technology you don't understand. 3 minutes, Hayes replied. Lisa touched Morrison's arm. He's going to do it. Hayes is actually going to fire on them. Morrison nodded slowly. Part of him felt sick at the thought. But another part, the part that had watched helplessly as the Vraxians prepared to slaughter millions of innocent people, felt something else. Satisfaction. 2 minutes. Zreth finally seemed to understand that Hayes wasn't bluffing. You wouldn't dare. The Galactic Council will— 1 minute, Hayes interrupted. I strongly suggest you start moving. The Vraxian flagship remained stubbornly in place. Around it, more and more ships were breaking away, fleeing toward the system boundary. But Zreth held his ground, his entire sense of reality crumbling around him. 30 seconds. Kate watched her console, counting down. 20 seconds, 15, 10. Morrison held his breath. Time's up, Hayes said quietly. Then his voice became hard as steel. Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh, demonstrate our resolve. On the Vengeance, Weapons Officer Walsh locked onto a Vraxian battlecruiser, one that had fired continuously at the Dreadnought throughout the entire exchange. Her targeting computer calculated the solution in microseconds. Firing main cannon, minimal power, she reported. The Vengeance's primary weapon discharged with a beam of light so bright it temporarily overwhelmed the horizon's visual sensors. The beam was only active for 3 seconds, using barely a fraction of the weapon's total capacity. The Vraxian battlecruiser, a ship half a kilometer long and crewed by 3,000 warriors, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not exploded. It vanished along with a perfectly circular section of space behind it that was now completely empty. Even the stars in that area were gone, their light consumed by a weapon that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. The communication channels filled with panicked alien voices. The remaining Vraxian fleet scattered like birds fleeing a predator, their formations dissolving into chaos as every ship raced to escape. Sreth's flagship was the last to leave, accelerating hard toward the system boundary, but before he left, his voice came over the channel one final time. Gone was the arrogance, the contempt, only shock remained. "What are you?" Hayes didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his words were directed at every ship in the system, every species that was monitoring the battle. "We are humanity," he said simply, "and we will not be victims." The Vraxian fleet disappeared into slipspace, retreating in complete disarray. The system fell silent. On the horizon's bridge, Morrison realized he had been holding his breath. He exhaled slowly, staring at the massive dreadnought that floated before them. "Kate," he said softly, "get me a secure channel to Earth Command. I think Admiral Blake is going to want a full report." Kate was smiling, tears running down her face. "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir." Lisa looked at the Vengeance and then at Haven's Gate below, where millions of people were safe because of a ship that shouldn't exist. "The galaxy is going to lose its mind when word of this spreads," she said. Morrison nodded. "Good. Let them be afraid for a change. Let them understand what it feels like to be helpless." Outside, the Vengeance hung in space, a promise and a warning. The news traveled across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours of the confrontation at Haven's Gate, every major civilization knew about the Vengeance. The story grew with each retelling. Some said the human ship was 10 kilometers long. Others claimed it had destroyed 50 Vraxian vessels. The truth was terrifying enough without exaggeration. Commander Nina Ross sat in her office at Earth Intelligence Command, watching information pour in from sources across the galaxy. Her job was to analyze galactic responses to major events, and this was the biggest event in human history since first contact. "The Galactic Council has convened another emergency session," her assistant reported. "They're demanding Earth's immediate presence." Nina shook her head, a slight smile on her lips. "Let them demand. We'll arrive when we're ready." She pulled up reports from their intelligence network. The galaxy was in chaos. The Vraxian Empire had gone completely silent, their ambassadors refusing all communication. The elder races were holding urgent private meetings. Smaller species were frantically trying to understand what humanity's new power meant for the existing order. And everyone, absolutely everyone, was afraid. Senator Charles Brooks arrived at Earth Command headquarters looking tired but determined. He had been in meetings with the United Earth government for 18 straight hours, dealing with the political aftermath of the Vengeance's reveal. Admiral Blake met him in the conference room, along with Commander Diaz and several other senior officers. "The Council is threatening sanctions," Brooks said without preamble. "Economic isolation, travel restrictions, potentially military action. They're claiming we violated 17 different weapons treaties." "Treaties we never signed," Blake replied calmly. "Treaties that were created specifically to keep species like us from becoming powerful enough to challenge the established order." Brooks nodded. "That's exactly what I told them. The government's position is firm. We will not apologize and we will not disarm." "They're going to push back hard," Diaz warned. "The elder races have ruled this galaxy for thousands of years. They won't accept a newcomer species disrupting the balance of power." "Then they'll have to learn to accept it," Brooks said firmly, "because we're not going back to being second-class citizens in our own galaxy." 2 days later, the Vengeance arrived at Zenith Prime. Captain Eric Hayes brought the Dreadnought out of slipspace close enough to the station that the massive ship filled the viewports of the council chambers. It was a deliberate move, a message that humanity was no longer asking for permission. Inside the station, High Arbiter Kelnoth stared at the ship with barely concealed fury. Around him, representatives from dozens of species argued in dozens of languages. "This is outrageous," one ambassador shouted. "They bring a weapon of mass destruction to a diplomatic station." "They violated every protocol," another agreed. "This is an act of war." Ambassador Lisa Grant stood at the human table, her expression serene. Kate Sullivan stood beside her, along with Captain Morrison and a security detail. They had arrived aboard the Horizon hours before the Vengeance, and Lisa had spent the time preparing for this moment. "The emergency session will come to order," Kelnoth demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The human delegation will explain themselves immediately," Lisa stepped forward. "We're here because you summoned us. As always, we came when called. The fact that we arrived in a ship that makes you uncomfortable is not our problem." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Kelnoth raised his arms for silence. "You have violated multiple weapons treaties," he stated. "The construction and deployment of planet-killer class weapons is strictly forbidden. The Galactic Council demands that you decommission this vessel immediately." Lisa's response was ice cold. "We never signed your treaties. We were not consulted when they were written. You do not get to dictate how we defend ourselves. This is not defense," a reptilian ambassador hissed. "This is aggression. You built a weapon that can destroy entire fleets." "Yes," Lisa agreed calmly, "we did. After watching this council refuse to protect us when the Vraxian Empire threatened our colonies. After being told we were too primitive, too new, too irrelevant to deserve protection under galactic law. We learned a valuable lesson from all of you." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces from 100 different species. "We learned that in this galaxy, strength is the only currency that matters. We learned that laws only protect those powerful enough to enforce them. We learned that your peace is built on the backs of species too weak to resist. Well, we're not weak anymore." Kelnoth slammed his hand on the podium. "This council will not tolerate such disrespect. You will decommission that ship, or we will impose sanctions that will cripple your economy. We will cut you off from galactic trade routes. We will embargo your colonies. We will make it impossible for humanity to survive in space." Before Lisa could respond, Captain Hayes's voice filled the chamber. He had patched into their communication systems from the Vengeance. "I've been listening to this conversation," Hayes said, his calm voice a stark contrast to the anger in the room. "And I have something to say." His image appeared on the main display, visible to every delegate. He stood on the Vengeance's bridge, surrounded by human crew members working at their stations. "We came to the stars seeking friendship," Hayes began. "We offered trade, cooperation, mutual benefit. We asked only to be treated fairly under your laws. And what did we find?" He let the question hang in the air. "We found condescension. We found exploitation. We found a galaxy that measures worth not by character or achievement, but by how long your civilization has existed and how many weapons you have. When we asked for protection, we were told we were too young, too primitive, too irrelevant." Hayes stepped closer to the camera, his blue eyes hard. "You created this situation. You made it clear that the only way to matter in this galaxy is through strength. So we built strength, and now you're angry because we learned the lesson you taught us too well." The chamber had gone completely silent. Delegates who moments ago had been shouting were now listening, transfixed. "Here's what's going to happen," Hayes continued. "We're not decommissioning the Vengeance. We're not apologizing for building it. We're not begging for your approval or your permission. The age of humanity accepting whatever scraps you're willing to give us is over." Senator Brooks appeared on a secondary screen, speaking from Earth. "The United Earth government stands with Captain Hayes. We will accept fair trade agreements and honest diplomacy. But we will never again allow another species to dictate terms to us from a position of assumed superiority. Those days are done." Kelnoth's face darkened with rage. "Then you leave us no choice. The Galactic Council will form a coalition to deal with this threat. Multiple species have already agreed to joint military action if necessary." Lisa saw several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. She recognized the signs of doubt, of fear. "Which species?" she asked quietly. Kelnoth hesitated just for a moment. That was all Lisa needed. "Let me save you some time," she said. "Your coalition is already falling apart, isn't it? Because every species in this chamber saw what the Vengeance did to the Vraxian fleet. They saw 300 warships flee from a single human vessel, and now they're doing the math, wondering what would happen if they faced that ship in battle." She was right. Over the next hour, reports came in confirming that species were withdrawing from the proposed coalition. The official reasons varied, but the truth was simple. Nobody wanted to fight humanity anymore. The Thaxian Confederacy announced they were opening new trade negotiations with Earth. The Kelvin Commonwealth sent a message congratulating humanity on their impressive technological achievement. Even species that had been openly hostile began sending diplomatic overtures. The galaxy's power structure was shifting, and everyone could feel it. Kelnoth watched his authority crumbling in real time. "This is not over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're right," Lisa agreed. "It's not over. It's just beginning. Humanity is claiming its place at the table not as supplicants but as equals. You can accept that gracefully or you can fight it. But either way, it's happening. She turned to leave, Kate and Morrison falling in beside her. As they walked out of the chamber, Lisa heard whispered conversations behind her. Delegates were already discussing what this meant for their own positions, their own species. The Vraxian Empire, humiliated and desperate, was not among those discussing peace. In their home system, High Commander Zreth stood before the Empire's War Council, his voice shaking with fury. "They have made us look weak," he snarled. "Every species in the galaxy now questions our power. This cannot stand. What do you propose?" the Supreme Commander asked. Zreth's eyes gleamed with dark purpose. "We mobilize everything. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior. We show the galaxy that one lucky victory does not make the humans our equals. We crush them completely, and we make it so brutal that no species will ever dare challenge us again." The War Council agreed. Orders went out across the Empire. Shipyards went into overdrive. Warriors were called from every colony and outpost. The Vraxian Empire was preparing for total war, and this time they would not underestimate their enemy. Commander Ross detected the mobilization 3 days later. She brought. The Arcturus Neutral Zone was a region of space that no species claimed, a buffer between territories that had been established by ancient treaties. It was here that humanity chose to make its stand. Captain Eric Hayes stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the tactical display as the Vraxian fleet assembled. 2,000 ships, the largest invasion force the galaxy had seen in 500 years. Every sensor showed the same impossible numbers. Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh checked her weapons systems for the 100th time. "All batteries charged and ready, Captain. But sir, even with everything we have, those numbers—" "I know," Hayes said quietly. He activated the ship-wide communication channel. "All hands, this is the captain. In a few hours, we're going to face an enemy that outnumbers us 2,000 to 1. They're bringing everything they have because they want to make an example of us. They want to show the galaxy what happens when someone challenges their power." He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. Young faces, old faces, all of them volunteers who knew they might not survive this day. But they're wrong about one thing. They think this is about them. It's not. This is about every species that's been bullied, conquered, or destroyed by civilizations that thought strength gave them the right to rule. This is about showing the galaxy that there's another way, that courage and determination can overcome arrogance and cruelty. Navigation Officer Ryan Cooper spoke up from his station. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth." Admiral Blake appeared on the screen. Behind him, Hayes could see the command center bustling with activity. "Captain Hayes, our conventional fleet is in position. 73 ships ready to support the Vengeance." Hayes shook his head. "Sir, with respect, those ships won't last 5 minutes against the Vraxian force. Pull them back." "Not a chance," Blake replied. "Every one of those captains volunteered to be here. They know the odds. Let them fight." Before Hayes could argue, another communication channel opened. Then another. And another. Captain Morrison from the horizon appeared on one screen. "The diplomatic corps is here, Captain. We might not have big guns, but we can coordinate communications and provide tactical support." More windows opened. Cargo haulers, colony defense ships, even a few civilian vessels that had armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find. None of them were warships. None of them stood a chance against the Vraxian fleet. But they were all here anyway. Hayes felt something catch in his throat. "You're all insane. You know that, right?" Morrison grinned. "We learned from the best, sir. The Vraxian fleet dropped out of slipspace with the precision of a military that had perfected warfare over millennia. They formed a massive sphere, completely surrounding the human forces. High Commander Zreth's flagship, the Dreadclaw, moved to the center of the formation. Zreth's image appeared on every screen, his scarred face twisted with hatred. "Humans, you had a chance to accept your place. You chose defiance. Now you will be erased from existence, and the galaxy will forget you ever reached the stars." Hayes met his gaze calmly. "We're still here, Zreth, still breathing. Still fighting. How does that make you feel?" Zreth's roar of rage echoed across the communication channels. "All ships fire at will. Destroy them all!" The Vraxian fleet opened fire. 2,000 warships unleashing their weapons simultaneously created a storm of destruction that lit up the neutral zone like a supernova. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic rounds, plasma bursts, all converging on the human position. The Vengeance's shields flared brilliant white, absorbing impact after impact. But this time the sheer volume of fire was taking its toll. Shield generators began to overheat. Warning alarms sounded across the ship. Shields at 70%, Walsh reported. 65-60. Hayes gripped his command chair. Return fire. All weapons. Show them what we've got. The Vengeance struck back. Every weapon battery, every missile tube, every energy cannon fired simultaneously. Vraxian ships exploded like fireworks, dying by the dozens. But for every ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. The human conventional fleet engaged, their smaller weapons picking off damaged Vraxian vessels and providing covering fire. The Horizon and other support ships coordinated target data, helping the fleet fight more effectively. But it wasn't enough. The numbers were simply too great. Shields at 40%, Walsh called out, were taking damage to outer hull sections. Some weapons batteries offline. Then the Vraxians revealed their secret weapon. The Dreadclaw's forward section opened, and a massive cannon emerged. It was larger than the Vengeance's main gun, and the energy readings made the sensors scream in protest. That's impossible, Ryan said, staring at his console. The power requirements for a weapon that size should tear their ship apart. Apparently they solved that problem, Hayes said grimly. Evasive maneuvers. The Dreadclaw fired. A beam of pure destruction cut through space, missing the Vengeance by barely 100 meters. 3 human ships that were behind the Dreadnought simply vanished, along with a chunk of the neutral zone itself. They're charging for another shot, Walsh warned. 45 seconds, Hayes made a decision. All power to forward shields. Walsh, target the Dreadclaw's weapon system with our main cannon. Full power. Sir, if we drop rear shields, we'll be vulnerable to... Do it. The Vengeance's rear shields dropped. Immediately, Vraxian ships swarmed in, pouring fire into the Dreadnought's unprotected stern. Explosions ripped through the aft sections. Crew compartments vented to space. People died, but the main cannon charged. All of the black hole reactor's power channeling into the weapon that had made a Vraxian battlecruiser disappear. Firing, Walsh said. The beam lanced out, striking the Dreadclaw's superweapon just as it was preparing to fire again. The result was catastrophic. The Vraxian ship's power core destabilized, triggering a chain reaction that consumed the entire vessel in the explosion that rivaled a small star. The shockwave swept outward, destroying Vraxian ships by the hundreds. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos, but the victory came at a terrible cost. The Vengeance was crippled, its rear sections destroyed, shields failing, power fluctuating. We're dead in space, Ryan reported. Main engines offline, maneuvering thrusters only. Hayes watched as the Vraxian fleet regrouped. They had lost their flagship and hundreds of ships, but they still had overwhelming numbers, and the Vengeance could barely move. It's been an honor serving with you all, Hayes said quietly to his crew. Then space began to tear open. Not in one place, but in 5. 5 massive slipspace ruptures, each one birthing a new arrival. 5 more Dreadnoughts emerged into the battle zone. They were slightly different from the Vengeance, each one a variation on the original design, but they were just as large, just as powerful, just as impossible. Commander Diaz's voice came over the communication channel. Transmitted from the lead ship, sorry we're late. Captain Hayes. It took a while to bring the rest of the fleet online. Hayes stared in disbelief. The rest of the fleet? There are more of you? Did you really think we'd bet everything on one ship? Diaz laughed. The Titan project never stopped. We just let everyone think it did. Meet the Fury, the Defiance, the Relentless, the Unyielding, and my personal command, the Retribution. The 5 fresh Dreadnoughts moved into formation, their weapons already charging. The Vraxian fleet, which moments ago had been confident in their numerical superiority, suddenly found themselves facing 6 human warships that each matched their entire force and firepower. The battle that followed was swift and brutal. The Vraxian ships tried to retreat, but the human Dreadnoughts cut off their escape routes. Surrender offers were rejected. The Vraxians had come for total war, and they got it. When it was over, the Vraxian Empire's fleet was destroyed. Fewer than 50 ships escaped to carry news of the defeat back to their home system. Captain Morrison surveyed the battlefield from the horizon, watching as rescue ships moved among the debris, searching for survivors from damaged human vessels. They had lost 32 ships and nearly 4,000 people. A heavy price, But they had won. 3 months later, the Galactic Council convened with a very different atmosphere. The council chambers had been reorganized. New seats had been added, positioned at the high table beside the elder races, humanity's seats. Ambassador Lisa Grant sat with Senator Brooks and Admiral Blake, representing Earth's government, military, and diplomatic interests. Around them, other species watched with a mixture of respect and wariness. High Arbiter Kelnoth opened the session with a formal statement. The Galactic Council recognizes the United Earth Government as a Tier 5 civilization, with full voting rights and all associated privileges. It was the fastest advancement in galactic history. Humanity had jumped from Tier 2 to Tier 5 in less than a year. Lisa stood to address the Council. Earth accepts this recognition. We look forward to working with all species toward a more just and equitable galaxy. Over the following weeks, the galaxy reorganized itself around the new reality. The Vraxian Empire, shattered and humiliated, sued for peace. Their territory was reduced, their military limited, their influence broken. Other species began reaching out to humanity, seeking alliances and trade agreements. The balance of power that had held for thousands of years was gone, replaced by something new and uncertain.